All right, we are live. Welcome everybody to the Duran live chat 26. How is everyone doing out there? If you can hear me, let me know on the chat. Greetings from Belgrade. Hello, David. Hello from Scotland. Let's see. Hello, Liam. Hello, Pax Bella. Hello, everybody. Hello, Thomas. How's everyone doing out there? Oh, I hear something on someone's phone. Is that you, Peter?
No, that's us.
All right, that's us. Hello, Tweety Bird from Toronto. Good to have you here. Hello, Aluk. How you doing? Greetings from Perm in America. All right, crystal clear. Hello, Dan. All right, Andrew. How you doing? From Islamabad. Cool. From Michigan. From the UK, Toronto. From AZ. Right on. Love AZ. All right, we have in Moscow, the one, the only, the man, the legend, host of RT's Crosstalk, Mr. Peter Lavelle. Peter, how are you doing in Moscow?
Well, spring made a quick appearance for the last 2 days. We'll be diving back into winter later in the week, but it's been so sunny. It's been, and when people talk about the weather in Russia, it's different than most places in the world. It's called a reprieve. Okay, so it's important to us. I'm fine.
All right, great to have you here. And we have people from St. Lucia, Lithuania, Bangkok, Mongolia, Wisconsin. Avni from Denmark, from Alabama. Hello, Sarah. How are you? Cheryl from Toronto. Nice to see you here, Cheryl. And we have in London, we have the Oracle of London. Editor-in-chief of the Duran,
That's sticking.
Alex. It is
sticking.
He's the Oracle because he made a lot of good predictions, Peter. He made a lot of good predictions last week. We'll get into it. Alexander Mercouris, how you doing, Alexander?
I'm extremely well. We've had a balmy spring weather in London also, by the way. Saturday was just gloriously beautiful. Not Saturday, Friday. And yesterday was pretty beautiful too. So, the weather's looking up. Spring is coming. And the world is becoming very interesting.
And so is Brexit.
Brexit is so interesting. Yes, well, that's almost the Chinese curse, Peter. Maybe you live in interesting times. We are certainly living in very interesting times here in England.
Yes, we are. Hello from people in Serbia, from Switzerland, Glasgow. Richie, how you doing? All right, guys. Hello, Pat Hacker. How are you? David from Newcastle. Guys, let's get into it. From John, let's answer some questions that people sent in before the live chat. From John, he wants to know what's the situation in Haiti. There's a big story that no one's reporting on.
It's awful.
You want to jump in on this?
Yeah, I just broad brush it here. I mean, it's always bad in Haiti, unfortunately. Haiti has been treated very badly by its great patron, the United States, and it has probably the most egregious governance issues that you could even contemplate. Even the latest government there is accused of surprise corruption. And of course, people are coming out in the street. I mean, they never recovered from the earthquake. The Clinton Foundation and others turned it into a new paradigm of international corruption. I mean, billions of dollars were dedicated. It disappeared. And it wasn't just the government; it was other people around it, and all these shenanigans of trying to help Haiti. What was it? I mean, I came across it. I think it was on Zero Hedge. Like they built 5 houses based on $20 billion. I mean, absolutely unbelievable levels of corruption here. But my takeaway from it, not that Haiti's in crisis, it's always in crisis, but it's not talked about at all in the mainstream media. You wouldn't know it, okay? Oh, what about, Alexander, how many weeks are we into the yellow vest now? 13 or so?
I think it's 14. 14.
Yeah,
14.
Well, there's the only reason why it's covered in American mainstream media is to debunk global warming. I mean, they don't even get into the ideas of genuine grievances of the middle class. And the only thing they'll mention about it is that now it's just a group of communist lefties and are anti-Semitic. What they do is they destroy or ignore and create false narratives. No, the Yellow Vest movement is a genuine middle class grievance movement. Okay. And the mainstream, because they want to control the narrative, will look at the most egregious forms of violence or graffiti. But then again, we had that BBC producer came out and said, it was the Douma alleged gassing. It was all at least the filming of those scenes was a complete hoax. Okay. We know that. We've talked about that. Did anyone step up and apologize? No. Okay. And then what about other protests? Oh, the protests in Venezuela. Okay. They'll focus on that. They won't talk about the yellow vests. They won't talk about Haiti, but they do talk about Venezuela because it is in their political interest. They are the stenographers of power. So that's how the media plays into all of this.
Alexander, your thoughts on what's going on in Haiti?
Yeah, I mean, it's apparently getting very bad there, and apparently there's lots and lots of riots, and Peter's absolutely right. It basically focuses on corruption. And of course, apparently a lot of the protesters are claiming that people from the US have been involved in some of that corruption. And I've seen a report, which I should stress I have not been able to research properly, that several Americans have now been arrested in Haiti on conspiracy charges. I'm not sure what that means, and I'm not sure what the charges really relate to, but it's clearly connected to this unrest. And of course, Peter's absolutely right to compare the situation in Haiti and the reporting, or rather zero reporting almost, that he's getting with the rioting in Venezuela, or rather the protests in Venezuela, which have not been particularly big recently, by the way, and certainly not on, as explosive as the ones in in Haiti appear to be, and of course the Yellow Vests protests. But of course the difference is the United States. The United States has an interest in overthrowing the government of Venezuela. It is completely committed to that objective now. The United States, or at least the deep state part of the United States, Donald Trump may have a different opinion, doesn't really want to see political change happen in France. So, and of course, in Haiti, as Peter absolutely rightly says, the United States has been deeply involved in Haiti now for a very long time. If we go back to the 1990s, the Clinton administration, of course, ordered, I think it carried out an invasion of Haiti, at least that's my memory of events. It was involved with supporting and then opposing President Aristide, the Haitian president of that time. I mean, firstly, as I said, it supported him, then I think it went against him. It was all very messy and very complicated.
And a very sophisticated and later transparent smear campaign, okay? It was really quite, I mean, that was their first run at smearing people in the Western Hemisphere like that on that level. Peter Schweitzer's book, Clinton Cash, good chapter on Haiti in there. Keep going, Alexander.
Absolutely. I mean, I was Peter just anticipated some of what I was going to say, because it seems that the Clintons also had personal, financial and business interests in Haiti at that time, and probably since, or at least that's what's been reported. Again, I'm not going to pretend I know the first book and chapter about all of this. And US involvement in Haiti has been so extensive, and it's been going on for such a long time, and it's so, if you like, uncontroversial, that it was even touched on in a James Bond film, as I remember. I think it was Quantum of Solace, where you see CIA agents operating in Haiti and plotting the overthrow of governments, not necessarily in Haiti, but in all sorts of other places.
Oh, yeah.
So it's apparently these protests in Haiti, which we are seeing now, are not only about corruption within Haiti and by Haitians, but they also have an anti-American flavor. And given the history, it's not surprising at all. And it's because I suspect that is the case, then that's the reason they're not being reported.
Well, and one of the interesting things, too, is that because the current government in Haiti is supporting the America's endeavors in Venezuela, they get a free pass, okay, because they're on our side, okay. You know, that's really immoral politics, but nothing new, and it shouldn't surprise us.
Yes.
All right. There's a story that we'll definitely be covering. I have a feeling about that. Let's go into some more questions that people sent, guys. Send us your super chats, PayPal, Patreon, links in the description box. Also go to the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt. That really, really helps us out. And remember to like this channel, smash that like button, share the channel with everybody you know. If you haven't subscribed, hit that subscribe button. Peter from Catherine. Can Peter please verify reports that Russia is shutting down the internet for a day? Is this for real or is this an April Fool's thing?
Well, okay, I don't know all the details about it. I did come across it very quickly. Well, I think very simply what the Russia is doing is, and it's very open and transparent about it, is developing its own internet. Because if the what do they call it? The death switch is in Trump's office. Okay, I mean the Russians and the Chinese and everybody else do not want to be held hostage to that. So Russia is developing its own internet, and from what I understand, that they're not going to shut down the internet. What I understand, they may be running it parallel to see how it works. Okay. You know, because no major country like Russia can't shut down the internet for one day. What about all the bank transactions and, you know, people needing to go to the store? And at least from what I've seen in Moscow, you always have to be careful when you talk about Russia. The number of people that pay with their card, okay, it's huge. Less and less cash is being seen in commercial transactions. So they would never shut it down. It could be wrong, but I can't conceive something like that. But what they would be doing is running it parallel to the existing internet to see what the performance would be. You know, it's like kicking the tires. So it's something they very much have to do. Again, this is very much in protecting Russia's sovereignty, and it's a really smart thing to do. And I'll tell you, depending on the results, I wouldn't be surprised if countries around the world would come to Russia and say, we'd like to buy, you know, your software and how you do it, okay? Because we don't want to be held hostage as well, okay? Because the biggest threat to world security is the U.S. Treasury Department, okay? That's who we got to watch out for these days.
Sorry, go on, Peter.
No, I was just going to say that. Go ahead, Alex.
I mean, can I just sort of jump in here? Because as I understand it, they're not actually going to cut off Russia from the internet on the 1st of April. No. What they are basically doing is testing various systems that they are developing. And this has to be understood in the context of the West's sanctions war against Russia. And the Russians are now anticipating every conceivable sanction that the US and its allies can throw against them. So there was talk some time ago of Russian banks being cut off from the SWIFT interbank payment system. The Russians have now created their own payment system. There was talk about Russian debit cards, banks not being able to operate MasterCard and Visa cards. So the Russians have now launched their own Mir card in substitution, in replacement of that. The Russians have been cutting down, as everybody has heard about, on their holdings of US Treasury bonds, because there's talk about the West trying to stop Russia from refunding its US debt. So they're now piling up gold. And of course, this is just one further step that they are taking. They are preparing themselves for action by the United States
and Britain
to cut Russia off from the World Wide Web. Now, if that happens, what the Russians are working towards doing is creating a system where a kind of intranet system within Russia itself will continue to function. That, of course, being far more important for Russians than integration in the whole part of the World Wide Web. This is not an intention to set up a kind of to isolate the Russian RUNET, the Russian part of the internet from the World Wide Web. But if Russia is basically expelled from it, then they will be able to continue to function with an intranet of their own. Now, not many countries are in a position to take these kind of steps. Russia can, and it is doing it. It's managed to do it in its financial system. It's now doing it in its internet system, and it's being pushed into doing it by the Western powers, who that way are losing influence and losing leverage over Russia.
All right, Alexander, a question from Andrew. Can you comment a little bit as to what's going on between India and Pakistan? We did mention a little bit, you talked a little bit about India last week during our live.
Yeah.
What's going on between India and Pakistan and the relations between the two countries?
Right, I think at the present moment in time, they are reasonably, well, shall we say they're rather less tense than they have sometimes been. India has, in Prime Minister Modi, an Indian nationalist government, which has historically taken a very hard line towards Pakistan over the Kashmir dispute, over disagreements over Afghanistan, over all kinds of things. But Pakistan, for its part, has recently had elections, and the new Imran Khan government, which has emerged in Pakistan, is believed to be more inclined towards seeking better relations with India. So that seems to have taken some of the edge of this hostility. And at the moment, things are less tense than they have been for some time. There are multiple problems. There is still, I think, considerable potential conflict over Kashmir. Though, as I said, the Imran Khan government seems to be less interested in that. There is also the Indian concern that Pakistan remains a very close ally of China, and the Indians have always been extremely nervous about this alliance between Pakistan
Sean Seven wants to ask real quick, Alexander, what about India purchasing the S-400 systems from Moscow?
Yes. I mean, this is always part of India's hedges. I mean, the Indians in last couple of years have appeared to tilt increasingly towards the US, but they have never wanted to break their connection with their BRICS partners, China and Russia. They've always had a somewhat difficult relationship with China. So in compensation, they've continued to maintain very close relations with Russia indeed. And that has meant that they've been buying very sophisticated weapons from Russia, S-30 fighters, S-400 anti-aircraft missiles, various other missiles as well. There's talk about them now acquiring the right to buy and build MiG-35 fighters as well. And this is very much part of India's usual balancing act. What I will say is that India, over the last couple of months, has appeared to be distancing itself from the United States. It's continuing to trade with Iran. It's continuing to trade with Venezuela. Apparently, it's said that it will continue to buy Venezuelan oil. And it has made it very clear that it is opposed to US moves against the Maduro government in Venezuela. So we see India constantly maneuvering, I think, with great skill. This kind of maneuvering happens irrespective of what government you see in India. One of the things all governments in India seek to do is to maintain a very close relationship with Russia, which has been a close friend of India ever since Indian independence. So that has always been a central plank of Indian diplomacy, and that explains the S-400 missile purchase.
And
Peter,
also,
you want to?
Yeah, we have to remember too that Pakistan has a very activist foreign policy right now, reaching out very much to the Gulf countries. I think the Crown Prince gave the go-ahead for a pretty massive aid package in investments, not just money, but investments. And China is obviously very active. There's the Pakistan-China relationship is very active right now. So what India is seeing is seeing the three-dimensional chess being played here, and it wants to be have its influence made felt. And I think that it's a very exciting, very interesting paradigm shifts going on there too. And what I like about it more than anything else is that these are countries that are in the same region or greater region, and they are working among themselves. They're not looking for cues from the outside. This is to stress what Alexander McCabe is saying right here. The relationship between Pakistan and the United States it's never really good. I mean, they try to put a good face on it, but you know, they have to worry about themselves, and they have to worry about their neighborhood. And you know what? They are doing it. Okay. The Kashmir issue has been mentioned. That's some time immemorial. I say that in tongue in cheek. I mean, it's a difficult situation. But it seems to me, and I agree with Alexander McCabe, the Pakistani government and the Indian government understand the limits of. I mean, the consequences of pursuing it so much is so great, in contrast to some of the other positive trends that are going on.
All right. Asma wants to know, Peter, is it true that Brazil applied to join NATO? And if so, does it mean that NATO is no longer NATO, but some kind of other organization outside of Europe?
Well, it's Colombia that wants to join NATO, it shows you is this, and John Bolton will put this on steroids. It's another example where the U.S. wants to replace the United Nations. It wants NATO to be what they call the League of Democracies. This is kind of a legacy of John McCain. And it's their way to start. You know, they'd like to bring in Japan. They'd like to bring in Australia and New Zealand. Okay, they you know, and then maybe, you know, somebody, maybe get Nigeria in there. Okay, what they want to do is they see. If NATO doesn't expand, then it collapses. Okay, that's the unfortunate logic of it. Okay, because NATO's mission, there's only one mission for NATO, and that is to exist. No other reason. Their mission is to exist. And having a country like Colombia, which it's nonsensical, it's ridiculous. But for the architects of NATO right now, that is a perfect way and to continue the alliance. And if you bring in Colombia, then, well, why not bring in, you know, all the other countries of the Washington Consensus? You know, considering the state of mind of the neocons will probably push it. I mean, I think Trump will say, you know, first you want Macedonia, now you want Colombia. Well, what's going on here? I'm not sure he's going to comprehend this one. But and I'm sure we've said it many times before, and we'll probably say it again. As long as it does in contravention of all of the promises Trump has made on that envelope that I keep talking about, he probably will say, well, whatever, okay, go ahead.
All right, let's get to some super chats. Thank you guys for your super chats. That's awesome. Alexander, we have a super chat from Brody. What do you guys make of the Lowy Institute's Asia Power Index describing Asia, ASEAN countries as the upcoming political and economical global powers?
I don't think there's any doubt about this, that the economic balance of power has been steadily shifting towards Asia, and it's been doing so for a long time. We have to be very clear that the country that they're talking about ultimately is China. I mean, China is the key. It's at the moment going through a certain slowdown, but it will get stronger. I'm sure it will shuffle this off and it will get stronger. Asia is the rising continent. It is becoming economically more important. It is becoming politically more important. Its diplomacy is becoming more energized. I mean, previously, as recently as, say, the 1990s, Asia was rising economically, but it was not very active in world diplomacy. They basically kept themselves to themselves. Now, their economic power has risen to the point where they are becoming politically more important and diplomatically more important too. And a video that Alex and Peter did some months ago, I think, on the Thucydides trap, which is about the fact that the rise of China and the rise of Asia is, in fact, at the root of many of the international tensions that we are seeing today, as the old powers, first and foremost, the United States, look upon this rise of the Asian states with increasing skepticism and alarm.
You know, I would say Eurasian states here, because I think that's really important. And if you think about it, yeah. I mean, I guess all three of us saw the same maps growing up. And what was the world map? It was the Western Hemisphere, and then you had Europe, and then Russia and China were always cut in half, remember? Mm-hmm. And so they would be on each side, but the West was in the center. Now, think about how the Eurasian countries see the world. They see the United States on the periphery. They see Europe on the periphery. Yeah. And that is a more of as we go through time, that's more and more a realistic view of the world, because Eurasia was always marginalized. Oh, we can go from like 1500 all the way up to basically the turn of this century here. But now those optics are very much changing, and there's a real awareness of it. I keep saying here, the multipolar world is in existence.
Yes.
But the Washington consensus still believes in the unipolar moment. That's why we're getting all of these tensions. So, Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, the Korean Peninsula may be an anomaly in a sense. And I personally think, and this is just my personal feeling, this is Trump trying to leave his mark, okay? And I think he gets a lot of resistance from people around him, but he wants to say he made peace there. He wants to be able to say, I mean, if peace comes to the peninsula and he wants to take credit for it, I don't care. I just want peace on the peninsula, all right? He wants that Nobel Prize, okay? That's important. He wants, Obama got it, he gets it. He wants it too, all right? And that is kind of an anomalous situation. And I think since Pompeo and Bolton and such, they see this as a personal thing with Trump, okay? Because no other things really are. Trump is just following into the Washington consensus about Iran, okay? I mean, if you even look at his tweets, they're not very imaginative. These are just repetitions of what we've heard for, what, almost 40 years now, okay? But, that's where a lot of this global tensions is coming from. That's why this rush for energy resources, because the U.S. wants to be able to control the European energy markets. Okay, it's very, very important for what they see as their security. And when you have country, Nordstream is very symbolic because it is the center of Europe, the most powerful country in Europe, Germany, and it is making a bid for an energy future with non-Western powers, with Russia, for example, or specifically here, okay? This is what really keeps people up at night in Washington, D.C., because they see it's like sand in their hands and it's just going through. They're losing it, all right? And this is going to make them far more aggressive. That's why we do, as the Chinese say, don't wish to live in interesting times, because we do.
All right. Super chat from E-Ray. Peter, I have a friend in Barnaul, Russia, who tells me Russian people have developed a buy Russian products attitude. Do you see this in Moscow?
Not really. Okay. But I think I can give a more nuanced answer to that. One of the things I love doing is going out to lunch, and there is so many new places, and these are Russian expressions of cuisine. Okay, it's not necessarily Russian cuisine, but the Russians are very interested in international cuisine, and they're coming up with a lot of their own things. As far as like cars, well, I actually do this on kind of a regular basis. As I'm walking down the street to the metro, it's about a 10-minute walk, and okay, Russian clothes. There's a very popular winter clothing chain. It's called Finfair, but it's Russian. It's Russian production, Russian design, but they call it Finfair. Because when they came out, a Russian branding wasn't popular, but Finland has this kind of, wow, it's cool, chic and all that. And so it's a marketing gimmick here. So, a lot of the food, yeah, Russian stuff, okay? I mean, when I first moved here, everyone wanted to buy imports. Food, it's Russian now, okay? And it's high quality, okay? It's just as good as anything you'll find outside of Russia. But like clothing, like jewelry, no, they still have a ways to go on that. It's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that brand awareness is everything for a product, okay? I mean, it may not be the greatest product, but it's a brand, and Russians are very brand aware. They really like that, okay? I've given the example in the past is that there's a new company. I like wristwatches, everybody knows that, and there was very little branding during the Soviet era. They made some good watches, but people didn't know about them, okay? Now there's a brand called Nika, and they're really amazing, beautiful watches. But it's people buy the brand. They never heard the brand. That's a nice watch, but people want a Rolex. Rolexes are great watches, but the most important thing about a Rolex is its name, not the product. And this is something the Russians haven't been able to adequately attain. I certainly believe they can do it, but there's a lot of investment in that, and it's brand awareness, and that's where there's a deficit.
All right, we have a super chat from Penguins fan. Happy Family Day to all three of you. Any comments on Justin Trudeau? Unfortunately, he got himself in another controversy at home in the justice system. Are you guys aware of what's going on with Justin Trudeau?
I read a headline in Zero Hedge, but I have better things to think about than Justin Trudeau. Okay, sorry, everybody. I'll make it. All right, I resolve here live. Okay, I will have every Monday or whenever we do our live chats, we will have Justin Trudeau moment. Okay, and I will give it to you. Okay, I resolve to do that. Okay, so yes, I know he screwed up something, but he always screws up, so I didn't need to add that to my day.
Alexander, yeah, you know what's going on with Justin Trudeau.
I'm afraid I have to give a pass on this one. I mean, like a lot of, I mean, obviously there's domestic politics in Canada, which I don't follow especially closely. That he screwed up, it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I haven't seen anything that Justin Trudeau does which I would personally call successful. So since he is completely unsuccessful in pretty much everything that he does externally, why should it be any different internally? But I'm not going to pretend I know anything about the story because, frankly, I don't.
You know, the only major thing is this Freeland, you know, the foreign minister and her meddling in Venezuela. You know, that is so un-Canadian. It's so anti-Canadian. It's so anomalous for me. Why Canada wants to step up and emulate the United States in meddling in foreign countries? It's just beyond me. But anyway, she's ideologically possessed, and his whole government is too. And it's going to make Canada a worse place to live.
Yeah.
All right, and Tweety Bird says that Trudeau is caught up in a corporate influence meddling scandal with SNC Lavelle.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Tweety Bird, for that chat. And we have from Arthur a super chat. Alexander, will the Labour Party defectors join a Tony Blair-backed centrist globalist party, just as everyone else is jumping ship? This was also a question sent to us by John before the show started as well. Alexander, on the Labour split, what's going on?
Yes. I mean, Alex and I did a video about this, and I think that is exactly what's going to happen. I think we are going to see an attempt to set up a centrist party, which will be Blairite, which will be centrist, which will be integrationist, which will be Atlanticist, which will be anti-Brexit.
I need kryptonite.
And which will, I predict, come the election, fail dismally in the polls. I think it will be a total and complete failure. I think it will rally support within the Labour Party further behind Jeremy Corbyn. What it might do in a very tight election, and I should point out that at the moment, Labour and Conservative are neck and neck, 37% each was the last optimum poll. What it might do is it might take away some votes from Labour in some constituencies, which might prevent Jeremy Corbyn winning a majority. And that might be the agenda behind it, or at least the agenda of some of these people behind it. But that is what the plan is. It is to set up a centrist party. It's been in the works for a long time. The fact that it is happening, however, is a sign that the Blairite attempt to recapture the Labour Party and to strip Jeremy Corbyn of his leadership has conclusively failed. These people have been trying to do it ever since Jeremy Corbyn became leader of the Labour Party. They've now realised they can't achieve it. So now they have done the logical thing in some ways, which is set up their own party.
Alexander, I have a quick question here. From what I understand, it was 7 MPs.
7. Okay. Yes.
And I'm not. This is not a trick question here. Okay. Those 7, the constituencies that voted for those 7, did they back Brexit?
Absolutely. Right. Not in all cases. For example, several of them are London constituencies where they would have voted Remain. But you're making a very valid point, because, of course, something like 2/3 of Labour constituencies which return Labour MPs, actually backed Brexit. But London constituencies, which tend to be Labour, and so far as I can judge, most of these people come from London or from places around there, they tended to vote Remain. But
they should resign in that case. If they had any moral fortitude at all, they should resign.
Well, Peter, the point to bear in mind is these people were elected to Parliament as Labour MPs, supporting a Labour Party manifesto in June 2017, and that was the election then, which clearly committed the Labour Party and a Labour government to supporting Brexit.
Thank you.
So if they're now turning round and saying that they don't support Brexit, which is what they appear to be saying, and that they are not Labour, which is obviously what they're saying because they've now left the Labour Party, then they are saying something completely different to what they said when they were elected. And already I am reading people saying from the constituencies in which these people, of which these people are MPs, people there are saying, I am disenfranchised. I did not vote for these people.
Thank you. Thank you.
And for the policies that these people say they support.
Yeah, big Democrats with a small d, huh? Jeez.
Well, there you go.
All right, Valias, thank you for your super chat. And on that note, Peter, on a lighter note, may we see Skippy?
Oh, where is he? Skip. Skipster. Come here, Skip. Skip. Skip, come to Papa. Skip to... Here you go, good boy. Come on. No, Robbie wants to be seen.
All right, there you go, Valley.
That's Robbie.
Oh, that's Robbie. That's not Skippy. All right.
Robbie.
All right. Well, we'll try to get Skippy on board, right?
Yeah.
As the show progresses.
Let me grab his ears. There you go. There you are. He was sleeping. There you go. You have such an international following. Everybody wants to see you. There you go.
All right. And this question's for you, Peter. It's a super chat. And the question is on Belarus and Russia. Are Russia and Belarus integrating or what? And there was a question before we started the live show, Peter, which is from Aluk, which is also about Belarus. Is it better that Belarus stay an independent country?
It is an independent country. Oh, come on. I mean, look, I mean, the Belarusian economy is so tied to the Russian economy. There's mutual interdependence here. This Lukashenko. He does this like every 2 years, makes a big deal about it, you know. And what he's looking for is some better trade deal with Russia on food imports, on energy, on all kinds of things here. Lukashenko, you know, he's the last dictator in Europe. Remember Condoleezza Rice, okay? And now he's trying to, you know, appeal to the European Union and all that. Oh, come on, nobody takes him seriously that way, all right? So, you know, this is it's just kind of reminding everyone that he's around, okay? You have to remember, a lot of people don't know this, but the Union Treaty under Yeltsin, which would, you know, 2 countries, 1 union, and Lukashenko, because he's been around for so long, he really pushed that. You know why? Because it would have allowed him to run in the Russian presidential election. And he saw himself, and I remember it because I was here in the late 90s, and he was on Russian television all the time. He played the Russian the Slavic Brotherhood card really intensely. Good-looking guy, strong guy, well-spoken guy, and then Vladimir Putin screwed it all up for him, okay, and just swept him aside, okay? And ever since then, he's essentially just kind of disappeared from the Russian consciousness, okay? So I don't take it very seriously. It's just a trend. I mean, if you just say, oh, you know, I'm sure the Radio Free Europe people are all, you know, all orgasmic about this, you know, but I don't put much stock into it. Nobody does here. Belarusians can come to Russia without any problem. So there's free movement of people. It's a very soft border. So no, I don't see anything really there. And plus, you know, the Belarusians have a different economic model. It's much more state driven. It's a smaller population, very homogenous. No real news there. Okay, it's just kind of Lukashenko, rattling the cage to see what he can get from the Russians, and the Russians will say, "You've gotten a good deal already." Okay, we don't see any reason for anything more. It's not as if they're going to be a candidate for the European Union anytime soon.
Right. From JR Alexander, how can someone be both anti-Brussels and open borders globalist, a friend of Assange and Corbyn, a libertarian and a Marxist, an excellent economist, and to think Russia is doomed to decline, and to be from Greece and have Australian citizenship, and to stand for elections in Germany? Yanis Varoufakis is all those things, Alexander. What are your perspectives on him?
Well, he is indeed.
And explain it for our viewers who Yanis Varoufakis is.
Yes,
I thought this was going to be a trick answer.
Yeah.
Like, who is it?
Yeah. Yanis Varoufakis is, as the questioner asked, an economist, trained in Britain, by the way. And I happen to know the man who trained him as an economist, who's a very, very brilliant economist, Indian, who has, we've chatted a bit about Varoufakis, and Varoufakis and I were apparently at school together for a short time, though I don't remember him. This would have been in the 60s. Varoufakis is a very left-wing, academic, Marxist economist. He was, for a very short period of time, in 2015, the finance minister of Greece, at a time when the Syriza government, led by Prime Minister Tsipras, appeared to be challenging the European Union over the bailout terms that Greece had previously negotiated. Now, I'm going to say straight away, in my opinion, Varoufakis was a disaster as a finance minister. Whatever his abilities as an economist, which I am not really in a position to judge, as a finance minister, he offended and aggravated the Europeans to an extraordinary degree by his amazing arrogance and his mismanagement of the diplomatic negotiations. He led Greece down a blind alley, and when it turned out that the Europeans were not going to cave to his demands, it turned out that he and Tsipras, his friend, had prepared nothing in the event that the European Union turned them down. So he was a disaster. The effect of what he did was to result in Greece ending up with a worse deal than the one it had previously been offered before Varoufakis and Tsipras came to power. So I'm going to say this about Varoufakis. He is full of inconsistencies. He doesn't see his inconsistencies. He is a left-wing Marxist. There is a very, very powerful tradition in left-wing Marxism of disliking Russia. And Varoufakis is absolutely part of that. That was even true, by the way, when the Soviet Union was around. A lot of these people were Trotskyists in those days. Varoufakis is pro-EU because he fits in very well with the globalist, integrationist, neoliberal outlook that we have often discussed about. He may be a Marxist in certain economic terms, but essentially he is very mainstream in others. And last but not least, his friendship with people like Assange and Corbyn is, I think, not surprising for somebody who takes radical chic to an extreme. Now, you will have gathered from all of this, and I don't think very highly of Varoufakis, and the fact is I don't. I think, as I said, he led us up the garden alley in 2015 in Greece, and I think he is a major disruptive force not a major disruptive force. He is a disruptive force which prevents a coherent anti-EU policy being developed by the sort of people who should be developing it. And if you want to talk about a genuine Greek Marxist economist, who apparently has no time for Varoufakis at all. I would refer to Kostas Lapavitsas, who is a Marxist economics professor at SOAS, and he is dead against the EU. And he's even written a book about this, saying that there is no good case for the EU. So there we are. A complicated answer to a complicated question, but Varoufakis is a complicated man and not one to be relied upon under any circumstances.
It seems like the very core of his genetic code is virtue signaling, because not everything you just said doesn't make any sense about him. Okay.
Well, I mean, he has.
I'm not questioning you. But given your answer, this guy is he's pretty screwed up.
He's very screwed up. He's also unbelievably arrogant. I mean, this is the thing that comes across. So, as I said, he's one of these people who's able to hold contradictory views. He's not a politician. He's never had a consistent political background. He's never stood for election, if I can put it in that way. So he because of his arrogance, he's able to sort of put all these very different contradictory positions and make it seem as if there is some political coherence behind them when there isn't.
Yeah, it's kind of like that Zizek guy, you know. Yeah. That pure garbage what that guy said. Doesn't make any sense at all. It's word salad. It's all this postmodernism, post-Marxism nonsense, gobbledygook.
Exactly.
It sounds cute, okay? Really.
Exactly.
And it sounds cute to people with low IQs. I'm sorry.
Exactly.
Sounds cute, low IQs, Marxism. Peter, a lot of people are asking, what are your thoughts on AOC and all the news she's made the last week? I've got a lot of other questions, but you just led into this one so nicely. So,
oh, she's so cute. Oh yeah. Well, what is it? That someone, I don't know. I'm not validating this here, but I just came across. He said, there's a lot of homeless people that can't pay their mortgages. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. No, I mean, on a more serious note, look. She's the darling. She's a very interesting mixture here. She's the darling of both the left and the right. All right, she's broken the code. Okay, because she is an attractive person. She's very enthusiastic. I mean, when you look at her, you listen to her. You believe that she wants to present some kind of convictions that she has here. What she essentially says doesn't make any sense at all. She read all of the wrong books at university, that's for sure. I guess she just hung out in Starbucks and listened to the virtue signaling of her cohort. But, of course, she's a rallying call for the left because she's an attractive figure. She's very adept at social media, kind of like Donald Trump in a way. She is a figure that shows the Democratic Party is dynamic, but I think every time Nancy Pelosi hears the name, her dentures start chattering in her mouth. Okay, she's worried about that, and of course the right is in love with AOC because she makes a mockery of the left. I mean, I think they talk more about AOC on Fox than they do at CNN. Maybe worth checking out. All right, so she's kind of a fulcrum for political discourse right now that is at a very low level in the United States here. And also, and I'll end on this: look at the juxtaposition. You have an older man, white man. Very wealthy, Donald Trump, and then you have a woman of color that was a year ago a bartender. Maybe that's where she picked up her politics in the bar, and she is very dynamic. So, I mean, it's very interesting, the optics of all of this, and the media loves it because it works for their business model, okay? They're not educating people about the issues, not at all. What they're doing is they're putting on a show, politainment, and that's what it is. And it's very dangerous because you end up with a public of know-nothings at the end of the day. And, and you end up talking about things you want, but I want stuff too, okay? But just because I want it doesn't mean I have a right to it.
Yeah. All right. Enough AOC. Let's get on to some real news, some real serious news. And from Voltaire, a question about the yellow vests. This one goes Peter and then Alexander, because it's a big topic, but Voltaire is going to open it up.
I'll defer to Alexander Mercouris on this one.
You'll
first.
defer to Alexander. All right, Alexander from Voltaire. Yeah, are the yellow vests being hijacked by the extreme left? And then let's just open it up, Alexander, to what's going on with the yellow vest movement.
No, they're not being hijacked by the extreme left. I think that we are going to be getting.
Is Macron using that as an excuse to clamp down on the yellow vests?
Yes. I mean, this is, of course, the point. The whole agenda is to try to discredit the yellow vests, sometimes by saying they're extreme right, sometimes by saying they're extreme left, sometimes by saying they're anti-Semites, sometimes by saying, other things. But the fact of the matter is, it remains what it has always been, which is a grassroots movement of La France profonde, the French mass of the population, especially those people who live in the countryside and in the small villages that make up the basis of France. I think we need to keep a very clear head about the yellow vests. One of the great problems is because this phenomenon, which is incidentally, as I understand it, actually growing. It had got a little smaller for a while over the Christmas period, but it's actually getting bigger now again. Because this phenomenon is not being reported properly or extensively, it makes it much easier for it to be misrepresented by people who are hostile to it. So we have to be very, very careful not to fall into the traps of thinking that these people are in fact some of the things that they have been called. Now, I said it's a grassroots movement. Because it's a grassroots movement, you will come across people with very divergent views within it. It is not a political party. It does not have a single centralized leadership. Its strength is that it has avoided those things. But that does make it easier to write in, as I've just said, views which the majority of its members don't hold. I would describe, from what I've seen about them, most of the people who participate in them in these protests as middle class, small c conservatives.
Also, it was very interesting how both of you shed light on how the media, the state structures like to portray the yellow vests. They're anti this, anti this, anti this. They never say what they're for. And I think that's very, very important. The second point, just a footnote to what Alexander Mercouris was saying. Yes, a grassroots movement like this that is not or doesn't have a hierarchy, which is its strength, but is open to entryism in the social sciences, they say, meaning it's easy to put on a vest, okay? Yes. And there always are those elements when you have a easy entry environment that are people going to infiltrate it, to discredit it, okay? And this is a long tradition. I would like to point out that I saw this documentary I made a couple of years ago, like 2 nights ago. It's called Best of Enemies, and it's about William F. Buckley and Gore Vidal. I don't want to be a spoiler here, but they had a lifelong hatred, two amazing American intellectuals. But a part of the film is devoted to the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. And we knew years, and it was very, very violent, made for TV violence, if you know what I mean. Again, this is very manipulative propaganda efforts on part of the authorities. And it was, I don't remember the exact number, but something like 1 in 5 of the protesters had connections to American intelligence, either domestic or international, meaning the FBI or CIA. And they're the ones that were throwing the chairs, throwing the fists, so it could made for television violence here. And we have to always be very careful. I have a good friend of mine, yes, Alexander Mercouris. You were on with him on Crosstalk, Xavier Moreau. Wonderful, wonderful guy. He's keeping a very close eye on the yellow vests, and we're going to maybe we could suggest having him come on and maybe talk a little bit about it, because he's in France. There's going to be a very, very big coordinated, yes, yellow vest demonstration I don't know on what day. I think he's still in the planning process, but he's talking to a lot of people across the country, and hopefully we can give you the freshest updates of what's going on there from people that are involved in it. Xavier Moreau, really good guy. Watch today's Crosstalk that's on YouTube.
Yes.
All right, Alexander, a question from Abdul Karim Hersi. What's Alexander's perspective on Congresswoman Ilhan Omar's alleged anti-Semitism and her confrontation with war criminal Elliot Abrams?
Well, I think she said exactly the right things to Elliot Abrams. I mean, I think all the things she said about this truly sinister man, Elliot Abrams, who has done the most appalling things in the past, whose hands have a lot of blood on them. I think she was absolutely spot on right. And I have to say, I mean, I am very, very tired about the way in which people who say sensible things, right things about people like Elliot Abrams, and who seem to me to be trying to move towards some, shall we say, impartial or less partial position for the United States on the Middle East issue, get attacked in this way and talked about being anti-Semitic. I didn't see those comments.
I didn't either.
Anti-Semitic at all. And I think it says much more about this terrible atmosphere of intolerance in the United States that she was attacked in this way, and attacked, as far as I could see, by the entire political spectrum. Good for her and brave of her to be talking out like that.
Also, let's be very clear here, and it's something that I've been watching over the years here. Okay, Congressman Omar came out with her statements. Well, she was her criticism of of AIPAC, the Israeli lobby in the United States, what she said was objectively true. All right, her attack on Abrams, she should be given a medal for. Okay, I've complimented her and given her praise on two issues that I think are important. But I seriously doubt that there would be other issues that I would agree with her on. So I think we should take it out of the partisan, polarized, this binary that they keep stuffing down our throat. No, Code Pink, okay, they are a peace movement in the United States, okay? And when they protest war criminals in front of speaking in front of Congress, they go out with their signs and they express their First Amendment rights. Okay, good for them. But when they go out in the International Women's Day parade praising late-term abortion, I disagree with them, and I will be very vocal about it. So let's not categorize ourselves into ideological boxes. Okay, that is intentional to divide us. Tomorrow, I'm making a program on Crosstalk. Is it time for a peace candidate for the U.S. presidential election? And I've brought together a conservative, and I've brought together a progressive. I'm still waiting for the name of the third guest, but I want to show this goes beyond party lines and beyond these labels that we're given and we're supposed to adhere to. No, we have to break out of that morass of linguistic swampdom, okay? And that's why I will praise Congresswoman Omar on that issue. All the more power to her. But it's always more complicated than that. And I think that's one of the things I like doing here at the Duran, is being able to flesh out these issues without being labeled something.
Well said, Peter. A super chat from Aluk to both of you. Anything about the 700 hostages in Syria?
Yeah, very good question. What did ever happen to those hostages? This was something that President Putin spoke about some months ago now, and that entire story seems to have disappeared. And I don't know what has happened to those people. Putin said, if we go back to it, that some of them were European Union citizens, and it would seem that there is no great desire to talk about that story.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. I don't know. I don't have an update on it either. But I mean, logic would seem to dictate that, there may be even Russian citizens there
Indeed.
too. Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Yeah.
And what do you do with these people? You know, there's it's easy to get in and promote these conflicts, but I've said this, you know, all the way going back to the Mujahideen in Afghanistan. You can let these people loose, but you'll lose control of them, and they'll come back and they'll bite you hard. Okay,
Exactly.
It's called blowback. Okay, and the world leader that has to worry most about this is Erdogan of Turkey.
Exactly.
That's what keeps him up at night. Believe me.
Stay on there, Peter. Stay on there, because there's a super chat from Penguins fan, which is update on Idlib in Syria and what the F is going on with Erdogan.
Well, we just had a few days ago. We had we actually had two summits. Okay, we had one in Warsaw where the U.S. was pushing for conflict and Israel conflict with Iran, and then we had one that got almost no press coverage, and it was in Sochi, and we had the counterparts from Iran, Russia, and Turkey, and basically, and we said this last time we talked. I'm sure Putin is saying, "So, my friend Erdogan, what have you come up with to resolve Idlib?" Okay, and it looks like Erdogan is still shuffling. He's still looking for a way out. Okay. Now there could be a way where there's a possibility. It's been aired that the Russians, the Syrians, and the Turks would work together, so everybody knows what's going on, and start corralling these people and trying to figure out what you can do with them, who they really are, where they're really from. And it will have to, I think, get down to a case-by-case basis. It's a long, long road ahead, but it is one possible one. And it shows, again, and we've been very adamant here, is that Russia will not give up on statecraft, okay? There's got to be a resolution to this, okay? Because the military conflict is over. Like I said, irrespective of all the nonsense you hear coming out of Western media, it took, 6 weeks and 30 Russian jets to destroy the caliphate, okay? And that was from September of 2015. Look how long this conflict has been going on. Look where American troops are right now, and look where ISIS is. They're right next to each other. What do? Have tea in the evening after prayers? You know what? I don't see them, the U.S., playing any positive role here whatsoever. They didn't destroy ISIS. It was the Arab Syrian army with Russian air power and with help from Iranian advisors and Hezbollah foot soldiers. They should be given the credit for destroying the caliphate, okay? Donald Trump did not destroy the caliphate, all right? He didn't. Now, he should honor his words and get his people around him to get the American forces out of Syria ASAP.
Alexander, you want to give an update as well as to how you see things in Idlib and in Syria?
Yes, indeed. I mean, what was very interesting was Erdogan's comments after the Sochi summit, because he took a fairly anti-American line. I mean, he said, first of all, that the deal to have the Patriot missiles, which the US was offering in substitution for the S-400 missiles, that was going nowhere. He continued to speak about the Russians as his major strategic partners. He seemed to have good relations with Putin. And as Peter absolutely rightly says, he's floated this very interesting idea of some kind of joint operation with the Russians and the Iranians to basically clear out Idlib, which, to be absolutely clear, has now been taken over entirely by Al-Qaeda. There was also a very, very interesting report in Al-Masdar, which is a Lebanese news agency, which is very reliable. One of the few reliable sources of information in the Middle East, which you need to be very careful what you read in Middle Eastern sources, by the way. But this one is a reliable source. And it seems that the militant fighters led by Al-Qaeda in Idlib are running short of ammunition, which suggests that Erdogan is quietly, ever so quietly, putting screws on them. So, as Peter says, all is in play. I anticipate that around sometime over the next couple of weeks or months at the most, there will be a general resolution between the Russians, the Turks, and the Iranians and the Syrians about the overall situation in Syria. I suspect that there will be a deal done whereby the Kurds come back under Syrian government control, getting some kind of loose cultural autonomy, but nothing like what they've had up to now, and that the Syrian army will eventually be able to move into Idlib after the Russians and the Turks and the others have basically essentially cleared it up. And I think that by the end of this year, Syria will be basically at peace. This is what I think is going to happen. And I think Sochi was a major staging point in on the route to that destination.
Yeah, Alexander.
I'm sorry, let me add.
Peter, can we get to some super chats on this exact subject that they want to ask you? It's on Idlib and on Turkey, and one of the super chats is, we have a lot of super chats on this. One of them is, why doesn't Turkey and Russia just bomb Idlib? Turkey just let the rebels go. And then there's a follow-up super chat, Peter, which says, dare Russia shoot down Israeli fighter planes? So you want to comment on those two super chats?
Well, I mean, sadly to say, in this day and age, after all these years of the war on terror, the U.S. would not tolerate that. They would not tolerate the physical destruction of the terrorist cell at large in Idlib. They would use the deep state neocons. They would use that as a opportunity to actually destroy the Syrian government. Okay. Because they'll say humanitarian crisis, genocide. They'll go through all the usual litany of nonsense. Okay. No, there's no quick solution here. And what I wanted to say before the super chat is that I'm pretty sure Putin has made it very clear to Erdogan and to Assad is that Russia doesn't want to have a large footprint there. They want a base there. They want to have good relations with the two militaries. But Russia it's not in their game plan for. See, they don't want to pull an American thing of just staying there decade after decade after decade. No, like I've said before here, is that Putin tells his generals what to do, and the generals will say, who do we kill and when do you want us home? That's how it works, okay? No long-term commitment, because it's not in Russia's national interest to be involved in an endless conflict, all right? And I think that's, we have to make that very clear. Would Russia shoot down Israeli planes? I don't think so. Why would they? Would Syria? Yeah, maybe. Yep, they are growing to see. This is the whole thing. Syria in a regional context here is that the miscalculations of the West and the Gulf countries and Israel has brought us to a moment where Israel no longer has supremacy in the sky. This is the fundamental strategic change as a result of this conflict that was badly planned, badly executed, and badly ending for the people that started all of this, is that now Syria has the capacity to protect itself. And we're going to get to that point, I think, relatively soon. Israel is terribly worried about that because that was their trump card over the last few decades, is absolute air supremacy. And that's being whittled away. All right. And I tend to think also, I always tell people, keep an eye on Lebanon, because as Israel's fortunes ebb, they're going to react and they're going to lash out. Okay. And their favorite lashing target is Lebanon, because Hezbollah defeated them in the last border war. And that is a really difficult wound for the Israelis to lick. Okay. Because that was a turning point. And that is a turning point. And now Syria, the catastrophe for the West and Israel and the Gulf countries, Israel's going to have to pay a higher price for its security as it defines it itself.
Alexander, I know you want to jump in as well. And as you jump in, another super chat on Syria. Erdogan and Turkey should make peace with Assad in Syria. Will that ever happen?
Right. Let's take these questions one by one. Let's the first one. A joint Russian-Turkish bombing campaign in Idlib. That is very, very close to what Erdogan has floated since the Sochi summit. I think Peter is absolutely right. I think we are going to see some kind of military operation in Idlib, but the diplomatic process has to be prepared very carefully. The diplomatic ground has to be prepared very carefully. Erdogan needs to be quite confident that he has the support of Islamist opinion in Turkey itself, because he politically depends on it. He's got to be concerned about what happens to these people in Idlib once Idlib is cleared of them, all these jihadi and militant fighters. And of course, there has to be the Russians need the Turks on side to prevent the intervention by the United States that Peter was talking about. So I think the Russians, master diplomats as they are edging towards that outcome. And we see Erdogan's comments pointing in that direction. We are not quite there yet. I think we are moving appreciably closer. Secondly, on the subject of Erdogan himself and needing to make peace with Syria and Assad, absolutely, of course he does. Again, Erdogan needs to find a way to do that will preserve some of his face, given the kind of expectations he has raised within Islamist opinion in Turkey itself, which had supported the jihadi war in Turkey, in Syria. So that I am confident will eventually happen, but it will have to be prepared carefully. And that is again what the Russians are doing. So I'm confident we will see that. We will probably see that before the end of the year. And I would not be surprised if eventually we see some kind of a meeting between Erdogan and Assad to basically end this conflict that has existed.
Which I think Russia would be the broker to bring the two together. That would be part of saving face right there. I think that's very, very important.
Exactly. That is exactly the point. And the third point, can I just come back to what Peter was saying about the Russians shooting down Israeli aircraft? The Russians have made it absolutely clear what the circumstances of them shooting down Israeli aircraft would be. It would be if the Israelis started launching attacks on Syrian or Russian installations in Syria, which put at risk Russian lives. Right. The Russians will protect themselves in that situation, and they have the air defense system in Syria ready to do that. Now, the point always to remember is that there are not many Russians in Syria. They are everywhere in Syria. So it is becoming increasingly difficult for the Israelis to just launch attacks everywhere and in any place without endangering Russian lives. The Israelis have to tread very carefully, and increasingly they are doing so. And Peter is also absolutely right. As a result of the Russians being in Syria and the Russians acting to support Syria and to build up its air defense system, Israel's room for maneuver, its formerly unchallenged supremacy over Syrian airspace, is gradually disappearing. So the balance of military power is slowly but certainly shifting against Israel. And as Peter also rightly said, the Israelis are very concerned about it.
And also, Peter, we have a super chat on that.
Hang on, let me just look a couple of sentences here. About the diplomatic parlay that's going on right now. It's very, very important to remember that the Gulf Council, the Arab League, is welcoming Syria back into the fold. And Erdogan doesn't want to be left out in the cold. He wants to be part of this process too, of reintegrating Syria into the Arab League and into other regional arrangements. He doesn't want to be the last guy. He wants to be part of that. And having a meeting with Assad, with the good blessings of Russia, would be part of the way for him to claim victory and certainly say that it wasn't all for nothing. Okay, it's for the Turks, it's always about the Kurds. Okay, and that's Damascus and Russia can work with the Kurds and corral them in where they get something. They're not going to get everything they want, but nobody's getting everything they want in this here. Okay, so I think Erdogan can. It's basically public perception. I think that's what has to be managed here, perceptions.
All right, Peter, very quickly, a super chat from Rainey on the same subject. Would Iran ever attack Israel?
No, never. No.
All right.
I agree with that. I cannot imagine any scenario where Iran would attack Israel. I think this whole story of Iran posing a threat to Israel is a phantom. It is an invention, and it should be called that.
Yeah. Oh, got to remember, Mike Pompeo, Hezbollah is in Venezuela. I mean, they pull this stuff all the time. Like, my goodness.
All right,
it's like comic book diplomacy.
Yeah, we're 20 minutes over the hour, guys. Hit that like button, share the channel with everybody you know, send us your super chats. Let's get more people to subscribe to the Duran, and we appreciate all your help. Thank you for joining us. And let's get into some more topics here, some big topics. We have a super chat from Arthur. Alexander, how will the EU react to Salvini's call to close the Italian central bank, take back their gold, and jail the bankers?
Well, I think the Europeans are watching Salvini and hearing Salvini saying more and more things like this, and I think they don't like it at all. And I think what makes them particularly annoyed and upset is that the more Salvini talks in this way, the more popular he gets in Italy. And I think that's the second that alarms them most. I don't think Salvini is really planning to do any of these things. I think he says these things because he wants to annoy the Europeans. But I think what they are also saying is that increasingly Salvini, and not just Salvini, I mean the entire Italian government, the Five-Star League people as well, are starting very gradually and very cautiously to actually exercise the power that Italy, as a major EU economy and a major EU state, has within the EU. So they've now vetoed the recognition of Guaido as president of Venezuela by the EU. They made it increasingly clear that they disagree with the sanctions that many people in the EU want to impose on Russia. They are slowly and steadily building themselves up to a position where they can challenge the EU combine, as I call it, better. And I think it is that which is concerning people in Brussels and in Paris and in Berlin and in Frankfurt more and more as they see the situation in Italy.
And just wait for the next time to vote on Russian sanctions. I bet the Italians will have something to say.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we have a super chat from Ferdbalin. And Bernard, thank you for your super chat as well. Ferdbalin would like to know, what are the dogs called? We've given their names before, but go over it again real quick, guys.
Okay. Me first. My Chihuahua, that's Buddy, and I have two dachshunds. The brown one, the chocolate one, is Skippy, and right at my feet here, the black one here, that's Robbie. Robbie, Skippy, and Buddy.
All right, Alexander.
Well, they're two golden retrievers. They're brother and sister. The one everybody always sees, because he comes and licks me during the programs, as a way of saying hello to our viewers, is Mishkin, who's the brother. The sister is Solveig. She's a little bit more shy. Mishkin is Russian for little mouse. Solveig is Norwegian for daughter of the sun. They're both literary names picked for them by my wife, who is an academic who teaches literature at a university. In fact, she's the head of a literature department there. And can I just say, by the way, thank you to one of our viewers who suggested that I buy for Mishkin some Polish sausage. I absolutely did. He loved it, but please don't worry about sending me any money for it, as you very generously and kindly offered. There is no such need.
Okay. Peter, from Liam, we have a question. With the protests in Haiti, Mexico, France, Germany, Belgium, and Spain, do you think we're heading for a time of social unrest? Do you think that the 2020s will be marked by social unrest?
Oh, I think we've entered an age of rage. Look, I mean, this whole international order that was put into play after the Second World War and cultivated during the Cold War, it was a very simple message. You're going to get richer and richer, and you'll always be safe. Well, those two pillars of this huge project of neoliberalism has fallen flat on its face, all right? You bet there's going to be more and more. And it's going to take on different forms in different places because of certain conditions and political culture. But, you know, it's really, these elites have failed. They're safe. They're richer. They have their walls surrounding them, and they lock, and they determine who goes in and out. And they do all this virtue signaling how everyone else should take in all of the the Statue of Liberty. Give us your poor and all that. That was a gimmick made up decades after the statue went up for tourism, more or less. It was given to the Americans by the French for liberty. It's why it's called the Statue of Liberty. It's not called Gateway America. Okay, another example where everything is twisted out of proportion. So the elites have made themselves safe, and they've insulated themselves from all these social ills and made people get by on less and less and less. This is about dignity. This is about dignity and pride in yourself, your community, your country, your history. No, this neoliberal project wants to destroy all of that. We're all the same, right? No, we're not. I'm not Mozart. I'm not Beethoven. I'm not Einstein, okay? I'm a talk show host, okay? People are better in their abilities and their talents, and we have to respect that, okay? This equity, forcing equity on society where everyone has to be equal. It's nonsense. It's dangerous, and people are rebelling against it.
And the biggest rebellions were Brexit and the election of 2016, which brought Donald Trump to power. And I agree with Peter.
And the yellow vests.
And the yellow vests, of course.
Yeah. Okay, we have a lot of people talking about Ukraine, and we also have a super chat on Ukraine. They want an update on what's going on with the Ukraine elections, and a super chat from Penguins fan update on Ukraine. How is the economy working, and what will happen to this country? Will it break in half? And is there going to be a war? Alexander, I see that you're ready to jump in. Go ahead.
Well, first of all, I mean, let's talk about the economy of Ukraine. It is going nowhere. Now, I'm well aware that people are producing some statistics which appear to show growth, not very high growth, around 2 to 3%, which means that even if you took it at face value, would still mean that Ukraine was well below its pre-Maidan point, which is pretty low already. But I'm very skeptical about that growth, as a lot of economists are, including economists who are pro-Maidan, because it doesn't seem to take the inflation figures into proper account. I think you would probably find that Ukraine is ticking along bottom economically, surviving basically from month to month as a result of IMF and EU and US handouts. So I don't see any great revival in Ukraine. I don't believe there is one. And that is the cause of the very widespread economic and political discontent there is in this country, which is expressing itself in what is happening in the Ukrainian elections, where this bizarre figure, this TV comedian, is now not only Zelensky, I believe his name is now not only leading the polls over the incumbent president, Poroshenko, and his supposed chief rival, Yulia Tymoshenko. Both of them, Poroshenko and Tymoshenko, have been around in Ukrainian politics since as long as I can remember. Not only does he have a big lead over them, that lead is now actually growing, which is remarkable. Now, what will happen in the elections in a month's time is, of course, another thing, because one of the things we must always remember about Ukraine is that this is a very dysfunctional political system. It doesn't necessarily follow that if people vote a certain way, the votes will be counted in that way. And I would not be surprised if all sorts of stops are pulled and devices are used to try to stop.
Saving Boris.
Saving Boris. Well, exactly. I mean, Peter said it exactly, because that's exactly what I remember happened in Russia in 1996. I would not be surprised personally if at the end of this process we saw President Poroshenko again. But we should be very clear, if that does happen, it will not have been done honestly.
Peter, you have any comments and views on Ukraine elections?
It seems to me, again, just my observations, it doesn't seem to me that the West is particularly invested in Poroshenko. Given the three major candidates, they can live with all three of them, okay? Because they're still going to be a client state of the EU and the United States. So I don't. The shenanigans will be internal. And I think, you know, from the Atlantic Council point of view, all three of them are acceptable. They're all anti-Russian. They all want to join the EU. They want everybody to pay for them as the oligarchs continue to just bottom out the economy. And these will be people that will do political favors for the West and to avoid reforming the economy, because it would mean basically destroying us, which is not going to happen under current circumstances. Nor does the West actually put a lot of pressure on them, because we've seen the IMF, because of political pressure from Washington, the IMF is willing to see a country like Greece live in the gutter for generations, but they'll break their own rules to give money to oligarchs in Ukraine. Okay, more rank hypocrisy here, and it's only for a political agenda. It has nothing to do with the welfare of the people of either country.
Yes, can I just agree completely with what Peter said? And may I just say something? I mean, I don't want people to run away with the idea that I think Zelensky, if that is his correct name, this comedian, is in fact a change, represents any sort of change if he was elected. The universal view is that he is basically a front man for another Ukrainian oligarch, who is a stalking horse for a man called Kolomoisky, who is a very sinister figure indeed. So in effect, what we're seeing in Ukraine is yet another battle between oligarchs. Poroshenko, who's an oligarch, the so-called chocolate king, but he's got lots of other business interests. Tymoshenko, who's the gas princess, and Kolomoisky, who has been heavily invested in the steel industry and in banking, and who is known to be on very bad terms with Poroshenko. So we shouldn't take these elections too seriously or expect any great changes.
Because there's no choice. Okay,
no, exactly. Anybody who really did offer a serious choice in Ukraine,
they would cut off.
And exactly, and who was, you know, able to articulate it and seemed to be coming anywhere close to winning, would not be able to continue their election for very long. There would be some way found to stop them standing, and that is the reality of Ukraine today.
Kolomoisky, the man with 3 passports.
Absolutely.
Cypriot, exactly. Israeli, and Ukrainian.
And the man that probably knows the whole story of MH17. But that's a topic for another.
Good point. Good point.
Another conversation.
And on that note, Alexander, there's a super chat from Phoenix FP40. Can you tell me where the apparent hatred of the Jews comes from, and is there justification for this?
The apparent hatred of the Jews is, I'm afraid, something that has gone back a long way. You can find lots of sources of it. You can find the sources of it in medieval Christianity, with all sorts of extraordinary ideas that the Jews were somehow responsible for the murder of Christ. You can find it from the fact that Jews in the Middle Ages were the only people who were able to engage in banking because they could charge interest, as the Christian church didn't prevented people from charge Christians from charging interest. So the Jews established themselves in banking and those sort of things. But I think personally that the major drive behind animus against Jews originates in the 19th century, when Jewish communities became integrated into European culture and began to become assimilated. And a lot of Jewish intellectuals at this time were at the forefront of the rise of modernism, what I would call modernism, and in healthy ways. If you look at 19th century, early 20th century European culture, people like Freud, people like Kafka, people like, yes, Marx, people like Einstein in physics. And I think this created intense animus against Jews from various people within 19th century societies who did not like this rise of modernism. Now, this is a very simple answer to a very nationalism. Exactly, a very simple answer to a very, very complicated subject. My own personal view, incidentally, is that hatred of Jews in Europe, at least, is now very, very limited indeed. I think that there is very little anti-Semitism in Europe left. I think, strangely enough, there's more in the United States, something I don't really understand, but that's my sort of feeling about this. There is very little indeed in Russia. Russia is not an anti-Semitic country by any stretch of the imagination. And President Putin himself is actually quite philo-Semitic. I think the major racial issue in Europe today is not anti-Semitism, it is Russophobia, which is at absolutely staggering levels. And I'm not the only person. A couple of years ago, I wrote an article for the Duran in which I talked about it and talked about how racism against Russians has now become the only acceptable form of racism. And it is now becoming something that is increasingly talked about by more and more people, and that is a good thing. But it is Russophobia that is the real problem.
Yeah, right. If we said, if anyone said, you know, it's Muslims are genetically programmed to deceive, or Jews are their genetic code is to deceive, you would be roundly criticized and thrown off of social platforms. But you can say at the highest levels of media and the political establishment, Russians and their genetic code is to be deceptive, and it passes without comment.
Absolutely, and there's no consequences for it. If you say it's perfectly respectable thing to say.
Okay, Peter, there's a super chat from Arthur. The Spanish elections look to be a right-wing landslide. Is the EU dream dying? Is the EU dream dying, Peter?
Well, the EU project is faltering, let's put it that way. You know, we're all skeptical here of the European Union. There's a lot of people in the European Union that actually like it. So let's be fair about that, all right? Because it works for them, all right? But more and more people it doesn't work for. So we have to keep that in mind here. When we look at these right-wing and populist parties, they have their own grievances against the European Union. I am not advocating for some kind of right-wing coalition. No. More than anything else, you need to address the democracy deficit within the European Union. You know, I don't want to disappoint anybody here. I'm not advocating taking a sledgehammer and destroying it overnight. Okay, that will be even worse for everybody involved. Okay, what we have to do is if this experiment is going to continue, then you have to start looking at the deficits, and you have to start not demanding people act in a certain way or accept certain beliefs. It should be the reverse. The powers that be in Brussels have to, you know, we need more feedback to understand why you're so grievous about what's going on here. That is the first step. Can you ignore all of their mistakes? Why? Because it doesn't affect them. The different turns that have taken here. And I want more of a balance right here. I do believe in national sovereignties of countries. I do believe in cherishing the culture that you were born into and gives you an identity. One of your identity is, our identities are very complicated, okay? And being part of a greater group is one of them. And it doesn't necessarily mean exclusionary. You see, people like to paint populists and conservatives of being always exclusionary. We're not exclusionary. As a matter of fact, we're much more inclusive than most people think. So the European Union is in very deep trouble here. Its future, I don't know, okay? But one thing I will say, one of the worst thing the European Union ever did was to introduce the euro, because the euro puts every national economy into a straitjacket where you don't have the tools to been able to control, manipulate, and stimulate your economy. Greece is the best example of that.
Absolutely. Can I just jump in on Spain? I mean, we do have elections.
My dog.
Yeah, we do have elections coming in Spain, but I'm not absolutely sure at the moment that there will be a right-wing landslide in Spain. But the socialists there still seem to be leading in the polls. But in Andalusia, the right-wing Vox party did very well. And Andalusia was one of the most left-wing regions of Spain. So we will see. But coming back to that underlying question, is the EU failing? I think the unequivocal answer is yes. It is facing rebellions on all sides, and it will continue to do so whilst it remains committed to this integrationist, top-down, anti-democratic mission that it has imposed on itself, and which the people in Brussels and Paris and Berlin are trying to force on their own people. If they continue to go down this road, yes, there will be more and more rebellions, and I think at some point we will see the whole thing start to unravel.
All right. See you. Thank you for your super chat. And Tunex, thank you for your super chat. We have a super chat from Penguins fan. Alexander, the EU and West placed sanctions recently on Russia. Should Russia do a knockout punch sanctions back at the EU to bring it to its knees? And Russia should just have killed the Ukraine economy by completely banning everything in Ukraine.
Right. Well, let's first of all I don't think Russia has the means to knock out the entire EU economy. I think if they were to try to do that,
be very damaging to Russia.
Be very damaging to Russia, and they haven't done. I mean, the Russians are very careful never to. You don't cut your nose to spite your face, as we say in England, and I think this has very much been their policy in response to the sanctions that the EU has been imposing upon them. What they have done is much cleverer, which is adjust their own economy and their own society so that it is able to move forward successfully without the sanctions. I mean, we talked about this earlier in the program when we were discussing the steps the Russians are taking to protect their own internet. So that's what they're doing. And I think it is the more correct policy. I mean, Russia can't knock out the whole EU economy. It can only cause problems for itself. Now, Ukraine is a different story. And I think here, we need to be very clear about what Russian objectives are in Ukraine. The Russians do not want to destroy Ukraine. Yeah. What their ultimate agenda is in Ukraine is a Ukraine friendly to themselves. And because the Russians have, I think, a much clearer understanding of how to achieve that, they realize that destroying Ukraine's economy and immiserating the Ukrainian people will not make them feel more sympathetic to Russia. It will make them feel less sympathetic to Russia. If the situation in Ukraine goes from bad to worse, which it is, then let them blame their own government and the people who seized power in 2014 and not Russia. That, I think, is the Russian calculation, and it is the right one. The Russians always play this game. They always play. They always give space for time. They always play long, and it always works for them in the end.
And also to kind of follow up on that, who in the world wants a failed state on their border? I mean, look at the, you'd have an immigration catastrophe that would affect Russia, that would affect the European Union, it would affect everybody here. And Russia has a long game. Alexander Mercouris is right. Russia wants to have a Ukrainian neighbor that is not hostile to it, okay? What friendship means, we could discuss it another time. But they don't want a hostile country that is being used as a pawn by primarily the United States to create instability on Russia's borders and within Russia itself, okay? So Russia would be playing into the hands of the people that want this instability. So they're playing I've had long arguments with my Russian friends and others about the long game, all right? And that's what's being played right now, because you can have this Banderite ideology, you can glorify Nazi collaboration, it can do all this stuff here. It doesn't fix the economy, okay? And this is what the long game is about. It's about the Ukrainians coming to terms of what it means to be Ukrainian and what it means to have a country called Ukraine. Because with the coup in February 2014, it set into a train of events, into a play where its sovereignty was compromised. Crimea left and joined Russia. You have two restive regions in the east that do not see the government in Kiev as legitimate. And considering how the Kiev regime treats Donetsk and Lugansk, why would anyone in those two restive republics want to ever be under the control of Kiev again? These are the issues that the Ukrainians have to start working.
All right. Do we have Peter there?
In London. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you now. Yeah.
All right, okay. Oh, I guess somebody was censoring me. Okay.
YouTube was censoring that discussion. Peter, we have from James.
I was on a real roll too.
Yeah, I know. Well, here's another question to get you going. Was General Gaddafi's free homes, farms, education a real thing? And if so, how was it paid for? And could Venezuela do the same thing? Those kinds of ideas would be dangerous to the Western world, because if a third world country can do it, then anyone could do it.
Well, there was a lot of free stuff in Libya, and it was the richest country on the African continent per capita. It was I think it's very fair to say it was a very authoritarian regime, but it was quite prosperous. Gaddafi, with the largesse of oil exports, threw his money around all through Africa. He's a very popular leader within Africa. But the political system is different. I'm sorry, the political conditions in Libya is very different than it is from Venezuela. Basically, you had 7 tribes in Libya that Gaddafi was able to unite in some understanding of unity to keep the country together. And because of the largesse of the oil revenues, he was able to keep them all in balance. And that's why he had such longevity. Everyone says it was always through the use of force and violence and torture. No, not at all. They had a social contract that worked for most people, all right? And this is no myth here. Would that model work with Venezuela? I don't think so, because one of the things that's not talked about in the liberal media, that a great deal of Venezuelan politics is race-related, okay? You have many people in the opposition that are descendants of Europeans. Just look at the people that surround the random guy. I love that, how Moon of Alabama uses that term, Guaido, the random guy. Yeah, he has a face for Western media, but not for Venezuelan, because the race differences, people, that identifies your politics for a lot of people. And for these opposition, in that dark skin, getting out everyone, okay. Race is an important issue. Race didn't play a role in Libya. Alex?
We're losing Peter again. Peter, what's YouTube doing to you?
Can I say?
I was saying I had such pearls of wisdom there. My God.
Yeah. Can I say a few things? First of all, by the way, he wasn't General Gaddafi. He was Colonel Gaddafi, but that's incidental. Yes, a lot of what he did was indeed. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you good.
Yeah. I mean, what he did was for real. I mean, Libya was transformed socially and economically under his rule. I mean, it had been an extremely poor country with very low living standards before he became its leader in 1969. And at the end of the time, when he was overthrown, it had become a much more sophisticated and prosperous country with very generous health and education systems. They may not have been up to first world, developed world standards, but compared to pretty much everything else which existed in Africa, they were of a very high standard indeed. What Gaddafi achieved in Libya, I think, is not reproducible in Venezuela. Partly for the reasons, or mainly for the reasons that Peter said. I mean, Venezuela is a much more sophisticated society, a much bigger country than Libya is. It's not 7 tribes that somebody can manipulate in the way that Gaddafi could manipulate them in Libya. And on top of everything else, I read recently a very interesting article by Eric Zeus, which we republished in the Duran with his permission, which basically argues that one of Venezuela's great economic problems is that because Venezuelan oil is so heavy, it is only profitable when the oil price is very high. Now, by contrast, Libyan oil is very light.
Sweet.
So sweet oil, perfect word, Peter. So it is actually profitable at a very low price. So Venezuela doesn't have that big room for financial maneuver that Libya had. So I think we're talking about 2 profoundly different countries facing ultimately very different problems. And we shouldn't make too many analogies between them. The one thing they have in common is the hostility of the Western powers and of the United States.
Okay, we're approaching the 2-hour mark. We'll be going on for about another 15 minutes. And Peter, we have a super chat from Jess. In the face of obvious criminal activity and FISA court abuses, do you think that the new Attorney General will actually indict the real criminals?
I certainly hope so. As we did a separate video on this here, there's so much public knowledge now in the public domain, testimonies, we see perjury all over the place here. It's a no-brainer to call a federal have a federal prosecutor and grand jury get this started here. I mean, it's like a slam dunk as far as I can tell. I mean, what was it? I mean, you had what's his name on 60 Minutes?
McCabe.
Yeah. I mean, I was a confession.
Yeah.
I mean, that you can introduce that into court.
Absolutely.
I mean, it was a confession.
Absolutely.
I mean,
he's trying to row back. He's trying to row back on it now, Peter. Which shows how damning, self-condemning it actually was. Carry on.
No, but you see, again, this goes back to one of my main tenets here, is that people like McCabe, well, he knows that the liberal media is on his side, so he has his guard down. Yeah. I mean, it's like, you know, they're in communion with each other, and then it's people like us who say, "What did you just say? Did you have a lawyer next to you? Yeah. Do you realize what you just said?" Yeah. I mean, this is this ideological possession. Yeah. All right. So I really hope that William Barr can really lift the bar in the Justice Department, because it's these people, this whole Comey crowd gang really degraded it.
Absolutely. Can I just say, one person who must have been watching that 60 Minutes interview with absolute horror would have been Rod Rosenstein. I mean, McCabe has really put Rosenstein in it. And it's now turning out that there's more and more evidence that Rosenstein was deeply implicated in these activities.
Alexander, can I cut you off very, very quickly? Because one user is actually asking, before you go into this line of logic, can you give some examples of some of the crimes that Barr could actually go after these people for?
Oh gosh,
like Rosenstein, for example,
perjury,
right?
Well, but I mean, the other thing is, I mean, this extraordinary, and the previous questioner touched on them, this extraordinary abuse of the FISA warrant process. I mean, the thing to understand about that FISA warrant that was obtained against Carter Page is that it appears to have been based on false information. The people who signed off on it, one of whom, of course, was Rosenstein, misled the FISA court on absolutely key points.
Alexander, on the third FISA warrant, remember during the congressional hearings during the summer, he was grilled. Did he read it? And he never answered the question. He was very, very slippery about it. And it proves to me that he was the fix is in. His signature is pro forma. It doesn't matter because we're doing this here. That's a fraud on the court. Keep going, my friend.
Absolutely. The other thing is, of course, and this is, I think, going to be a major issue, is this campaign of leaks to the media, which was carried out on a simply enormous scale, especially during the transition period before Trump was inaugurated, but which continued afterwards. Now that looks to me not just as a a campaign, but a criminal conspiracy involving criminal acts, which were leaking of information, which is itself, it seems, an offence. But when it is leaking classified information, as it certainly was in this case, that becomes extremely worrying indeed. So I think we are going to look at that. There's a potential criminal offences there also. And I think, last but not least, I'm sure there are other criminal offences in the pipeline which we don't yet know about. But I mean, it does look to me as if we are talking about a genuine conspiracy here to stop Donald Trump first becoming president, first being elected president, then being inaugurated president, and then to remove him as president. I mean, I am not sure, for example, about the legal propriety of somebody like Rosenstein meeting with Trump and recording secretly things that Trump was saying in order to prepare the ground for removing Donald Trump, the elected and constitutionally elected president of the United States, under the 25th Amendment. I mean, that looks to me a very sinister operation, and I would be astonished if, when it was investigated properly, there weren't some kind of criminal acts committed as a result.
Also, thinking counterintuitively, it's pretty obvious. Everyone is looking out for number one now, and they're going to start throwing everybody else under the bus. So now we're going to get a conspiracy on top of a conspiracy.
Yes.
What do you bet on what's up?
Well, indeed.
Let Rod take the fall. Let Peter Strzok take it, and we'll ask for immunity, and we'll give the whole story. A couple of these characters, probably not all of them. I wish that all of them would, but they're going to flip. They're going to say to the whatever federal prosecutor is, "I'll tell you everything on my knees." Okay, I don't want a orange jumpsuit. Okay, it was Rosenstein that did it. Okay? It was Peter Strzok, and I wouldn't mind if you fit Jim Comey for an orange jumpsuit too. They're going to start. See, this is the lack of moral character we have here, okay, and lack of commitment to what they were supposed to be doing, is being non-biased, not being partisan, what the mission of what they're supposed to be doing. Now it is like a gang of thieves. They're going to flip on each other. It's going to be amazing to watch. Okay, McCabe's appearance on 60 Minutes was the first public opening salvo
Indeed.
of this. Watch them all tear each other apart. Get the popcorn, folks. Enjoy the ride.
Indeed. Can I just follow up to some
Yep.
points that Peter was making, which of course, I mean, I talked about criminal offences, but of course, there are lots of possible civil wrongs here. A lot of this
Carter
behaviour-
Page.
Well, a lot of this behaviour amounts to, I mean, to use the English civil expression, gross misconduct and abuse of public office. Now that can be both a civil wrong. Sometimes it can also be a criminal offence. But if these people were doing all the things that they appear to have been doing, in fact, which we can say definitely, I think that they were doing, in order to remove the constitutionally elected president of the United States, I mean, you know, abuse of office or misconduct in public office can be a very serious thing indeed.
What do you, let me just propose to both of you and our viewers here. What if they got a prosecutor of the caliber and the intent and intensity of a Mueller going after these people? Okay, I mean, they went for Manafort for tax evasion and fiddling with taxes in Ukraine. Okay, they go after Papadopoulos because he had went on a drinking spree and exaggerated things. I mean, these are such minor things, but the things we're talking about challenge the Constitution and the democratic order of the United States. If you had the same kind of bulldog, what do you think the results would be? I think you would see a lot of people go to prison.
Well, can I just say about that, Peter? I think the very last thing you want actually is a bulldog like Mueller. What you want is a very good lawyer who can look through all of this and construct proper cases, because where Mueller is essentially creating crimes, nearly all his, the great bulk of his prosecutions are, as you correctly say, process crimes. These things that a federal prosecutor looking into, which all of these people have done, we are talking about actual crimes, actual conspiracies, actual wrongs. And one of the things such a prosecutor ought to look into is the conduct of the Mueller investigation
itself.
Exactly. That's been a very improperly conducted investigation, supervised for nearly all its existence by Rod Rosenstein, who has a personal interest in it and who seems to have agreed to do it because of the pressure that he came under.
He's a witness. He's a witness.
Exactly.
Okay, let's take some super chats to wrap it up.
Real quick.
Yep, yeah. Real quick, so we can finish it up. We're at 2 hours. Richie, thank you for sharing and retweeting the channel and our merchandise at the Duran shop. Guys, go to the Duran shop. Pick up a t-shirt like this one. Looks good, feels good. Pick one up. That really helps us out. You can donate to us on PayPal and Patreon. And of course, like the channel, share the channel with everybody that you know. So real quick, let's do these super chats. Bernard, thank you for your super chat. Sean Ellis, your super chat. Do you consider what they did a coup against Trump? Peter, do you consider it a coup?
An attempted coup, yes.
Alexander, do you consider it an attempted coup?
Yes, I think so. I'm not the. I mean, Peter and I are not the only people who said. I think Dershowitz has said the same. I think lots of people who have legal backgrounds and have looked at this thing and who know constitutional law far better than I do think the same thing. I don't have any doubt about it. If you're going to try and use a device like the 25th Amendment to remove the president of the United States, and if you launch an inquiry like the Mueller inquiry, which is essentially geared to achieving the same objective, what else do you call it?
You almost said Muellergate, and that's you're right. You're right. It's Muellergate. That's what it is. Yeah,
that it is. Peter, what about Marco Rubio calling Maduro, Venezuela a mafia state and this aid from the West through Colombia? What's going on? That's from Penguins fan super chat.
Well, you know, who cares what Marco Rubio says? During the campaign, I thought it was a new crayon that was made, Marco.
I saw on Crosstalk that you guys mentioned about the aid and how the United States uses the
aid. What do you mean? It's arms
for its regime change purposes.
Okay, that's why they have Elliot Abrams there. He wants to repeat what he did under the Reagan administration. Humanitarian aid is arms. All right, money, drugs, the whole shebang. Okay, he wants another shot at it. All right. No, so I mean, Marco Rubio is a complete fool. The little boy from Florida. I have nothing more to say about Marco Rubio.
Yes, I mean, the other function of the aid, as well as being a vehicle to send arms into Venezuela, which I'm sure is what it partly is that it's intended to provide Guaido with a means to bribe people and to set up a kind of parallel government, a Guaido-led government with resources that the United States is providing to undermine the Maduro government. It's a very sinister operation. It's straight out of the Elliot Abrams copybook, just as Peter said.
Okay, all right, last question, because I gotta go.
But let's do this quickly, guys. Let's run through these super chats. Alexander, recently the BBC producer revealed that last year a gas attack staged by white helmets. What will happen next? We did a video on this. What do you think is going to happen next with the admission of the staging for the Douma attack?
Well, it'll be suppressed. It'll be forgotten. I mean, it's hardly news here. There was a most extraordinary article in the Financial Times in which, buried deep inside it, there was some sort of a discussion about the Douma attack, and it still went on to say that there was that the Syrian government was alleged to have used chemical weapons in it, whereas increasingly we're seeing that the evidence that there was a chemical attack has almost collapsed. The only thing I would say is that the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons is due to do a final report on this. When it does report, and I predict that report will probably say that there was no chemical attack, almost certainly will say that there was no chemical attack. We will see how extensively reported that is. But my own guess is, even if that happens, it will be buried.
All right, Rosebud, thank you for your super chat. Penguins fan Peter, the 3 Baltic nations, they are anti-Russian, but they're ethnic Russians. Do they want to go back to Russia? So the ethnic Russians in the Baltic nations, do they want to return to Russia?
If the ethnic Russians want to return, they can return. Okay, maybe with some difficulty, but they can. They do face forms of discrimination in the Baltic republics, and they're, the European Union doesn't live up to its creed about a treatment of minorities. Okay, because they're Russian, they're conveniently ignored. Okay, so their plight isn't something you would want to envy.
And to follow up to that question, a super chat on that, Peter, the pro-West liberals in Russia, have they forgotten what liberal policy put them through during the 90s, but they still want to be pro-West? Why? We did a show on this as well.
It's hilarious to me. It reminds me of socialists and Marxists. They just did it the wrong way in the Soviet Union. We can do it better ourselves. No, okay. I mean, look, most liberals that live in Russia right now have a lifestyle and an income because of the Putin economy. Okay, so these are the big complainers, the ones that benefited from the economic transformation of Russia since 2000. So what they're saying is they're just talking out of their sleeve. I won't use stronger language than that.
All right, and Alexander, to finish it up, a super chat from Bernard. ISIS fighters who want to return to their home countries. What do you think of that? Should they let them return to their home countries?
Yes, well, and go on trial. Yeah,
exactly. Peter said it exactly. I mean, these people have been implicated in terrorist activities. If they are citizens of Germany or Britain or France or wherever it is, they should go back to those countries, be prosecuted for their involvement and membership of a terrorist organization, and sent to prison and treated in accordance with the law. And I think that's what should happen. And I think
Your Honor. Yes, Your Honor.
Yeah.
All right, and we'll leave it at that. Guys, thank you very much for another great live chat, number 26. Thank you for your super chats. Thank you for all your support. Share the channel with everybody you know. Smash that like button. If you haven't clicked the notifications bell, click that notifications bell. Go to the Duran shop, pick up a t-shirt, donate to us on PayPal and Patreon. Peter, what are you looking at in this week coming up?
Oh, geez, there's just everything here. The whole Venezuelan story fascinates me here because the shock and awe period is over and it looks like it's faltering. But that means that the possibility that military, some kind of incident will be created. That's what I'm looking at next year. All right. I don't think Trump wants to get into a military operation. That's why that brought in Abrams to create an incident, a Venezuelan Maidan. Keep your eyes open.
All right, Venezuela, Maidan. Alexander, what are you looking at this week?
Yes, I mean, apart from Venezuela, well, I mean, there's always Brexit. Sorry to say that, but for me, the big story actually now is going to be what's going to happen in the United States around Russiagate, because I think the McCabe interview actually might have been the bursting of the dike. I mean, it was incredibly, unbelievably reckless interview, actually, and I mean, it exposed. I mean, it shows what an incredible. I mean, he's a bit of an
incredible
idiot,
interview.
Incredible interview. I mean, a bit of an idiot, frankly, to go on television and say the things that he did say. But he said them, and as I say, he's trying to row back on them, but he won't succeed. And I gather that the Republicans in the Senate are now getting geared up. And so I think we will see what happens. But I think that is potentially very big news there.
Yeah, you know, it's like OJ going on 60 Minutes and saying, "Yeah, I did it." I mean, that's
human nature. I can just imagine. You know, some people, they want to admit their crimes. This is just human. They're dying to admit what they did. We talked about this, Peter. You know, that these guys are happy because they're part of the resistance. So they want, you know, those bonus points to say, "Look what I did to stop Trump."
Well, you can all resist behind bars. Okay, good for you. All right, we'll send you oranges. Okay, good, fine.
Yes.
All right, guys. Great chat. Great live show. Thank you very much to everybody. We hope you guys have a really good week wherever you are in the world, and keep on following us. We have a lot of good videos coming out. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk, live from Moscow. Thank you very much. And the Oracle of London from London, Mr. Alexander Mercouris. Thank you very much. Take care, everybody. Have a good Monday and a good rest of the week.
Right.